Thank you, Eric, and thank you everyone for having me and welcoming me. I love being a part of conferences like this where you can come and get to know people and especially eat together. I feel like it's just a huge treat and privilege, and the banquet, of course, that we experience. I'm going to be sort of touching on it in one of the texts that I'm going to be speaking from, but it is kind of a vision, isn't it, of what is to come, and I walk away just more filled up than probably you do, even though I'm supposed to be here to give, I receive. My talk today is called Repeating What We've Heard, which is sort of the reasoning behind the word Mockingbird, the reason why we called the ministry Mockingbird, that we're repeating the message, the same message. Get that song playing one more time, that same song. I loved that video. Just incredible. And but I want to sort of rephrase the title because that lurks behind everything I'm about to say. But in order for me to get a fresh purchase on something today, I've been thinking of the movie Serenity. Does anyone know this movie? It's a sci-fi film. It's actually quite excellent if you haven't seen it. But no one did see it. That's why there's not going to be a sequel, so thank you very much. But there's a refrain in that movie that says, you can't stop the signal. And they're referring to like the information superhighway. You can't stop the signal, Mal. It's, no matter what happens, you can't stop the signal. And that is sort of the subheading of my talk this morning. And the reason I latched onto that is for a number of reasons, because a signal is something that repeats. It's something that's a constant that goes doot, 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 doot. It's sort of, we look at waves of sound waves and we see repetition. We see something being transmitted. And when I think of the Reformation, and when I think about 500 years and why on earth we would get together to celebrate something, I can't remember the last time I celebrated 500 years of anything. Can you? I just celebrated my 10th wedding anniversary. I don't think we're going to hit 500. And I love her very much. But there are two signals at the heart of the Reformation, which I want to speak about today. And I'll do it in the only way I know how, which is to kind of unpack the culture in which we live. Now, I'm a firm believer that we are not outside the culture as Christians. To call someone cultural is like calling them religious. The question is not if, but how. How are you cultural? Not if you're cultural. You're breathing. You're therefore cultural. You you interact with other people, and you are therefore cultural. So I'll be dealing with the culture, not as this big, bad, evil thing, but as something in which we're all a part of, and trapped by, but also complicit in, and sometimes ministered to, and doing ministry in. So signals have come back into vogue as something that people talk about. Maybe you've heard the word signaling. Signal. I'll tell you how we signal things today. We signal our success in our interactions with one another. We signal our success, our busyness, our importance. From, I went to Cornell. You ever heard of it? Andy from The Office. That's a signal I'm sending out to you. Or, how are you doing? Well, we haven't had a second to catch our breath this fall. I don't know what we're going to do. We're just so busy. Signaling we're important. We are really in the midst of it, and stand back because things are happening. Social media basically exists to send signals. Signals of self-importance, signals of all sorts of import, and signals of success, signals of beauty, signals of worth. But you don't have to be on social media to be a person that's sending signals. Just yesterday, I was here at this conference, which is about, the beauty of the gospel and the sort of centrality of God's grace in the life of sinful people. And here I was talking to people that know and love me, and I'm saying, well, one thing you don't know is that I was actually asked to write the introduction for this book on the table that you're holding, but I was so busy that I couldn't do it. I listened to myself, I was like, why did I say that? What's wrong with me? I was signaling. I'm a kind of a big deal. That's what the signaling's saying. And of course, the more you feel the need to do that, what does it actually signal? You don't actually think you're that big of a deal. Of course, Christians, we signal our holiness, don't we? There's the Babylon Bee. If you don't follow it, you should. It's kind of, it's in a lot of ways, it's replaced the Onion for me. There was a wonderful headline they had a couple years ago. 6-day visit to rural African village completely changes woman's Facebook profile picture. But maybe we're not signaling our piety as much as we're signaling how much we get the gospel, how much we're not like those other Christians, how much we understand the Reformation. We get it. I'm here. What did Chad say yesterday? I've out-orthodoxed you. Don't worry. I've turned my convictions into an ism. Of course, it's directly counter to Scripture. In Matthew 6:5, when Jesus saying, when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on street corners and to be seen by others. Essentially, don't be on social media, is what he's saying. Translation, those people on Facebook have received their reward in full. It's not that great of a reward, frankly. Of course, the number one way we use the word signaling right now, and it'll change in a few years, but the number one way is you've probably heard the term virtue signaling. We signal our virtue. And this is a term that was coined by the British journalist James Bartholomew to describe online activism. But what he meant when he said that is that virtue signaling is when you think expressing an opinion about something establishes that you really care. Using a hashtag. It's not as much about the hashtag itself or what it's meant to symbolize as it is that you have the right opinions. And that having an acceptable opinion makes you morally superior to those who don't or those who remain silent. Now, this is you get into really dicey territory because a lot of social, online activism, virtue signaling is based in something really good or something very laudable and concern about things that are going on, systems of oppression and, all sorts of, sin that's happening and wanting to raise awareness. However, what sinful human beings do is we use these things, our affiliations, in order to signal. We co-opt them. We subvert them. One, of course, most popular way to do this is to identify yourself as a victim or to identify really closely with people who've been victimized. You kind of claim, by saying, even though, I'm a white guy, I really identify with, I'm a feminist. That's what we say. And talk to an actual feminist. They're like, well, I don't know. That's look what happened to Joss Whedon or something like that. You, who did the movie Serenity. Watch out. But I'm doing that in order to sort of co-opt that righteousness of someone who's actually maybe suffered something. But I haven't, but I've got a big heart. And I want to make sure you know that I'm a good guy. And so I want to borrow that righteousness and use it for myself. It works, but of course it only works for a little while. Because soon the little circles of righteousness, they close in, and they get smaller and smaller and smaller until you're completely exhausted. Christians know exactly what this is like, because it's just called righteousness according to works of the law. Of course, we're sophisticated about the way we signal. Most of our signaling is not overt, and it doesn't actually most of our virtue signaling doesn't take the form of hashtag activism. We signal that we're on the side of the angels by the food we eat, by the clothes we wear, most importantly, by the questions we ask in a public setting. You ever done this? This is why I always dread at our church, we do lots of, dinners and adult ed and stuff like that. And the Q&A, I actually really enjoy the Q&A because it's fun and we that's when people get into it. But it also is when the signaling just goes out of control. Christians signal in prayers, by the way. We're constantly signaling in prayers. I'm really praying for the right thing. You were praying for some sort of superficial stuff, but I'm closer to God's heart. And so I know what it is to really pray. And we get these messages, and maybe you don't even know you're sending them, by the way, but we're signaling all the time. We're indicating maybe how good we are by what we hate, by what we oppose. And the louder I talk, the more I hate it. Of course, this requires almost no effort and no sacrifice whatsoever. So it's easy. And this is why we talk about virtue signaling and we kind of roll our eyes. And yet, if you've been on the other side of someone virtually signaling against you, watch out. Watch out. Because in every case, we're not signaling virtue. In every case, whether it's success, whether it's holiness, whether it is likability, we're signaling righteousness. Signaling is a euphemism for self-justification, which the Reformation, let us remember, it's Luther reading Paul and putting self-justification right back at the center of what it means to be a sinner. It was always there in the Bible. It's always there in Rich Young Ruler. But it is sort of a reminder or a reclaiming this as the central to our identity as sinners. What T.S. Eliot, once he diagnosed the human condition as saying that we're absorbed in the endless struggle to think well of ourselves. We're all absorbed in the endless struggle to think well of ourselves. The human sinner is caught up in an exhausting and painful pursuit of self-justification. As I said, though, the degree to which we signal, and you do it, and I do it, it's not out there, it's in here, it signals the extent to which you actually feel condemned or guilty or not enough. It comes from an engagement with the law, in other words. And often an unspoken engagement with the law. It flows out of a core insecurity and guilt that we don't know how to deal with in a culture that has outlawed most of its conventional forms of absolution. And so we have to shift the blame all the time, and we're constantly signaling our self-justification. And it's very awkward and exhausting, and we all know what it's like. It feels unsustainable, but it's part and parcel of what it means to be a human being in the 21st century. You see, the law is everywhere. It is more. I always talk about the difference between little L law and big L law. I want to conflate the two today. And I want to do so not to say that the law of God isn't true and holy and the law of man isn't arbitrary and cruel, but to say that whatever it is you're using to justify yourself, whatever signals you find yourself sending, I was asked to write the introduction. That is the law for you. Martin Luther in his second disputation to Antinomian's 13th argument said this. He said, the law, in quotes, ought not to be taken in a technical or material grammatical sense, but as it is and sounds forth in your heart, urging and battling your heart and conscience so that you do not know where to turn. For the law is that experience or power, or as Paul calls it, that handwriting impressed on your hearts, which is castigating and beating it, so that if the gospel would not come, you would soon have to despair. Yet this one law occupies and fills the whole earth. Indeed, it is so big that the world can barely contain it. This is why it is impossible to remove the law totally. For even if you were to remove these letters, L, A, W, which can be very easily deleted, the handwriting etched into our hearts, which condemns and drives us, nonetheless remains. Sometimes when you talk about justification by faith and the distinction between the law and the gospel, and you actually get into the nitty-gritty of everyday life, because the world doesn't. They say law of God. I don't really know about that, but I certainly feel the imperative to be skinny or successful. I certainly feel the sort of keeping up with the Joneses pressure. I certainly feel that my kids need to be a better reflection of me than they currently are. people say, well, you're making the law into the problem, not sin. Yeah, kind of. What we're actually saying is that for the sinner, the law is a problem because it's so good, or basically because of the force that it exerts on you. Because of the force it exerts on you. It is what is driving you and driving you to despair. And if we know anything, we live in a world that is just filled to the brim with despair. All other Christian traditions, and I'll say something that'll probably get me in trouble, they do not take this seriously enough. That the law is everywhere, and it is exerting its pressure on absolutely every human being you meet or interact with. It is our point of connection with John or Jane Doe, the unnamed as well as the ultra-famous. Wilfred McClay, one of my favorite writers, said, "It is impossible to exaggerate how many of the deeds of individual men and women can be traced back to the powerful and inextinguishable need of human beings to feel morally justified, to feel themselves to be right with the world." What he's saying, and what I'm trying to say to you, is that no matter who you are, no matter what you claim to believe about the world, the cosmos, the country, more than actually to be good, what you want is for others to know just how good you are. That's what it means to be a human being. And of course, that's what it means to be Larry David. Roll the tape.
Larry David.
Huh?
That's great.
Never had a wing before.
I know.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
It's your night to shine.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. What's that? Wing donated by Anonymous.
Yeah.
Anonymous?
Yeah.
I'm not crazy about that. Now it looks like I did mine for the credit. As opposed to, Mr. Wonderful Anonymous.
I know who it is. It's Ted. Ted is anonymous.
What are you, kidding?
No. Isn't that great? He donated the whole wing. Didn't want anybody to know.
Well, he told you, so he apparently wanted somebody to know.
He told me, okay?
Who else did he tell? How do you know he just told you?
No. The point is that he didn't need all the fanfare and didn't need
Fanfare? What fanfare? I don't like the fanfare. Are you saying I like fanfare?
You can tell a few people. He just doesn't need the whole world to know that he donated all this money.
You know what? I didn't need the world to know either. Nobody told me that I could be anonymous and tell people. I would have taken that option, okay? You can't have it halfway. You're either anonymous or you're not. What is it?
Look, people are pointing out and go, there's Larry David.
Oh, yeah, there's Larry David, the guy who has to have his name up on the wall, as opposed to Mr. Anonymous, but was really Ted.
I'm proud of you.
Anonymous. It's fake philanthropy, and it's faux anonymity. What do you think about that? Oh, I want to go talk to Senator Boxer. I'll be right back.
Isn't he great?
Ted.
Yeah.
Oh, you know each other,
Oh, yeah.
right? Oh, my God.
You look fabulous.
You are such a hero.
Oh,
You
you
know,
are,
when you
Barbara.
founded the Oceans Foundation, you changed everything because his kids couldn't swim in the bay,
Oh,
in the ocean. Oh,
the poor little kids. They couldn't swim in the bay.
the best.
Oh, what about the 400-foot pool they could swim in? Was that wasn't
No.
available to them at the time?
Well, could I just say, that aside, look at this.
Oh,
Anonymous.
but don't-
You really, I know. I didn't say, Larry, did you know this Anonymous is Ted?
Yeah,
You just can't
I
tell.
did.
The
Yeah.
point I want to make is, you didn't need to do this.
Well, you know
You
something.
did it
That's
out
true.
of your-
He didn't.
He
But that's
didn't.
why
Yeah.
that's why I kept my name off, because I think it's the exhibit, it's the issue that needs to stand forward.
And you're
not
so
me.
passionate about the issue.
Thank you.
Too many people don't do things out of the goodness of they want the credit. You are #1 in my book, Ted Danson.
Senator?
Please don't forget that.
I'm sorry,
I've got to run. Bye, Larry. Bye, Ted.
That's so sweet.
See you later. Yeah.
Right this way.
Wow. Wow, I didn't expect that.
Give me a break, Anonymous. If you're anonymous, how come people know about it?
I told maybe 1 or 2 people, friends, that I didn't think I wanted to have a secret.
Oh, really? I have a feeling everybody in this room knows.
Can I have your attention, everybody? We're going to start the ceremony, and Senator Barbara Boxer would like to say a few words.
Thank you so much. This is a night to thank 2 very special people. One is Larry David. Larry David. We are very thrilled with his contribution. And the other is anonymous.
The law is at work, self-justification, even in good deeds. Martin Luther wrote in his commentary on the Galatians, the fact is, the more a person seeks credit for himself by his own efforts, the deeper he goes into debt. We just saw it, and you're deeply familiar with this. But it is impossible to gain peace of conscience by the methods and means of the world. Experience proves this. Luther, by the way, is always appealing to experience. So for all you Lutherans who get weary about experience, he's talking about the hearts, consoling, all this stuff. Anyway, that's a different talk. He says, various holy orders have been launched for the purpose of securing peace of conscience through religious exercise, but they proved failures because such devices only increase doubt and despair. That is Martin Luther speaking from the grave to describe 2017, because today's holy orders are so powerful and all-encompassing that it's almost, we don't know what we would do without being so religious. You know, I'm convinced that the problem in modern society is not that religion is on the wane, but that we're more religious than we've ever been, and about too many things. Well, what do I mean? I mean, last week in the Episcopal Church, Exodus 32 was the text, which is, the golden calf. And it's amazing. Moses comes down from the mountain with the Ten Commandments, and he reads it to the people. They confirm receipt, saying, twice, we'll do it all. We got it. The next scene, like a Larry David thing, the very next scene, they're like, uh-oh, he's gone. Let's make this golden calf. They cannot abide a religious vacuum. The human heart cannot abide a religious vacuum. We are like actors looking for a play. So our world that we live in today is simply just one that is filled with replacement religions. And you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the religion of parenting, where you worship your child, and everything revolves around the child. And the role of the parent is to shield their kid from ever not just having harm, but any kind of rejection or anything. You create a nightmare for higher education. I live in a country, in a college town. You have the religion of romance, where your soulmate that you are supposed to find, who's only one person, the law, good God, and they're supposed to not only accompany you through thick and thin, they're supposed to essentially fix you and save you. Not only be your best friend, but your lover. I mean, it's everything possible. That's the religion of romance, and it leads to escalating levels of loneliness unlike we've ever seen in the Western world. There's the religion of success, where nothing is too important not to sacrifice on the altar of money. Your kids, your family, your well-being, your sanity. Religion of personal authenticity, where everything is evaluated through the lens, which is a very difficult, shifting lens of what it means to be authentically you. And it actually, as we know, it drives a person to despair the further you drive them into themselves, because you realize that doesn't really exist. Or what it was yesterday, it's different today. And of course, most palpably today, what I was describing earlier with virtue signaling, it's because politics has become to serve as a religion for most of us. So we are more religious today than ever before. And you think about this in terms of, how the law that is actually at work killing people, and there's no gospel. New York Times had this incredible article a couple of weeks ago called "Why Are More Teenagers Than Ever Suffering from Severe Anxiety?" Maybe you know the current state of the country, but anxiety just replaced depression as the number one reason undergraduates go seek counseling. The American College Health Association found a significant increase of undergraduates reporting overwhelming anxiety in the previous year, from 50% in 2011 to 62% in 2016. Meanwhile, the number of suicide attempts in that precise demographic has doubled in the last 10 years. They profile a bunch of kids, and they say for many of these young people, the single biggest stressor is that they, quote, never get to the point where they can say, I've done enough, and now I can stop. There's always one more activity, one more AP class, one more thing to do in order to get into a top college. Kids have a sense that they're not measuring up. The pressure is relentless, and it's getting worse. There's this sort of pursuit of self-justification that has at its center the not the golden calf, but the golden acceptance letter. It's because there's no gospel. It's nothing. This is not just, by the way, keep your house tidy. It's achieve or die. It is killing people. And so we have, here along comes this message of Christianity, which is the message of the Reformation. It's just the message of the Bible. And we have this word that addresses people who are, what did the sickness that Paulson talked about yesterday, predestination sickness. That is, have I done enough? Am I assured? Am I in? Everything becomes some sort of, barometer of that, some attempt to answer that question. Law disconnected from gospel turns life into a competition where you resent and even hate your neighbor because they might get into college instead of you. But where are you with this? I mean, where do you feel like you're not measuring up? Where do you feel like you're behind the ball? Is it at church? Probably. But maybe it's at your office. It's on social media for sure. I mean, let me make it clear, lest I sound like I have disdain for this cycle of signaling that we're all stuck in, this obsession with signaling. I don't. I have compassion. Because if at the heart of this is religion and a religious vacuum, then what we are doing when we're signaling and what college students are doing and what materialists are doing and what social justice warriors are doing is they're trying to work out their salvation with fear and trembling according to works of the law. And that, they don't need more judgment from me because those things have a judgment of their own. They bite back. Talk to anyone who's worshiping at the altar of the golden letter or the golden pen or the golden spouse, and you'll talk to someone who's in despair. And I'm not above it, and neither are you. See, when I talk about signaling, when I talk about virtue signaling, it allows me conveniently to write off any public utterance of concern as false. I don't want to hear about that. That's just virtue signaling. It's just a performance. In other words, calling out virtue signaling is a form of signaling. Superiority, of parsing the righteous from the unrighteous. And there's nothing more cruel than the cruelty of the righteous. That's what Niebuhr said, So today, when we're talking about divided times, it's because we're so religious, we're so caught up in our signaling, even those of us who are talking about signaling, because we're just so religious. Now, I live in Charlottesville, Virginia, and we had a little blip this summer. I don't know if you heard about it. I had people in Japan being like, what is going on in Charlottesville? Well, it's like, is that near where you work? It's right outside my office, the Robert E. Lee statue. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, we had a little visit from the neo-Nazis. And there's a lot going on there, and I don't want to get into the specifics, but what I can tell you as a person who lives in Charlottesville, what was our immediate response? Because people were shocked. We live in a place that's been called the happiest place in America, by the way. It always wins these polls for the best place to live in America, which only tells you that people in our town love filling out polls. But what did people say? Well, when we're trying to explain it, the first thing we all said, well, the Antifa and the neo-Nazis and the militia, those were all from out of town. And factually, that was 95% accurate. But what did we just do there? What did all of us just do there? We're the good people, and the bad people out there on the left and the right came and invaded us. We are making a distinction between the righteous and the unrighteous with ourselves on the righteous side, right? We are taking this cultural law and we are justifying ourselves. And in the process, we're creating even a deeper us versus them division, which is what the whole thing is about in the first place. So it's a sickness. When Paulson talks about a sickness, it's a sickness that you can't cure. You can't cure by understanding it or analyzing it enough. You need actually a savior. Fleming Rutledge writes in her wonderful book, The Crucifixion, that there's nothing more characteristic of humanity than the universal tendency of one portion of that humanity to justify itself as deserving and some other portion as undeserving. Nothing is more foundational in Christian faith than the recognition that we can never be justified in that way. To speak of deserving is to divide up the world in a fashion that is utterly alien to the gospel, because Christ came to die expressly for sinners, for the undeserving, for the ungodly. Now, this leads me to the second part of the talk, the second signal, which is the signal that the reformers, that Jesus was sending, which is the mammoth yes, not no, at the heart of the gospel. This is grace, the formal mechanism of which is double imputation that Dan so brilliantly expounded on yesterday. This message that not only are you forgiven, but you're made righteous, which makes for you and I the passive receptors or the receiver of a signal. Now, I got to see this because in Charlottesville and in the nation, we've been thinking very much about racial divides and racial tension. I got to see what this actually looks like, or at least an image of what, an analogy, however you want to frame it, in this incredible documentary called Accidental Courtesy. It's available on, it was on PBS, and it's available on Netflix, about this musician. He's in his 50s now. His name's Daryl Davis. He's a black man who's played with like Chuck Berry and stuff. And he spent the last, maybe you've heard about him, he spent the last 30 years befriending men in the KKK. Befriending them, not lecturing them. And we see what happens when the signal that comes is not one of self-justification, but one of grace. Let's roll this. This is a clip from the documentary.
Y'all know who Geraldo is? Okay. I was on this show with some neo-Nazis and some Klan.
KK kids, children too young to hate.
Daryl, I want to ask you, have they had an active children's movement?
The children's movement started with a fellow named Tony Laricki in the state of Maryland, who formed the Klan Youth Corps.
Okay, Mike, why don't you lead out the various Klan families? And your name and age?
My name's Aaron, and I'm 12.
So what do you think about your parents belonging to these organizations?
I think it's fine.
Why, sweetie?
Well, I mean, they're allowed to like their race. They're allowed to be proud of who they are, too.
Are you going to be a member of the group also?
Yes.
So now both daughters are in the Klan. And their father, he got sentenced to 10 years in a federal prison. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to call Tina, the mother. I tracked down her number. I called her. And when I said, Tina, this is Daryl Davis, she hit the roof. She cursed me up one side and down the other, wanted to know how did I get her phone number, what did I want, blah, blah, blah. I said, Tina, shut up and listen to me for a second. I flew with them to Chicago and drove them out to Marion, Illinois, to the federal penitentiary, where their father was in prison, so they could visit him. And nobody in the Klan had ever done that for them before. And so they had a turnaround.
Well, my little girl came a long way. You know, no thanks to her father and I. We really did our best to destroy our kids. And I do believe God does work through people, other human beings, and he most certainly uses Daryl Davis as an instrument, because that man has touched a lot of lives.
Me and my husband, Harley, would like to extend our best wishes to the city of Rockville, Maryland, as you celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. Neither me nor my family are members or are affiliated with the Ku Klux Klan anymore.
Okay, very powerful. What happens here? Daryl, who's not Jesus, by the way, though I like to think of him as Jesus, because he's speaking at one of our events next week. Somehow God has given this man the supernatural patience to absorb an enormous amount of racial epithets and hatred. And he calls this woman. It's a transmission. It's a signal. And all she does is pick up the phone. And what does she first do? She curses him up and down until he finally says, just shut up. If you got people here out there read Robert Capon, this is basically Robert Capon put on in a documentary form. In her life, the transmissions had all been one way from her and her parents to her family to the world, in that we are justified by our racial ethnic background. And this is very important, and it's important to the sake that I'm able to, see myself as morally superior. And here you have Daryl calling her up, telling her to shut up after absorbing the negativity, and then saying, what I want to do is fly out there and drive you and your daughters to see your husband who's in the federal penitentiary. No one in the Klan had done that. Now that's just a picture of what this message, this transmission from God actually looks like. You know, Luther talked about it. He says, here we work nothing, render nothing to God. We only receive and permit someone else to work in us, namely God. Therefore, it is appropriate to call the righteousness of faith, or Christian righteousness, passive. We do not have it of ourselves. We receive it from heaven. We do not perform it. We accept it by faith. Then do we do nothing and work nothing in order to obtain this righteousness? I reply, nothing at all. Now, this is one of the great breakthroughs, the reasons that we're here today. And it was born out of both his reading of Scripture and, yes, his personal experience, his frustration with the fact that he found himself unable to engineer any progress or any merit by his own efforts. You know, he'd basically, been living in under ideal early modern conditions for the production of virtue, a scrupulous Augustinian cloister. But he found that it had simply no substantial effect in diminishing his sinful desire, at least not that he could discern. And so Luther feared for his soul. He didn't hear the question being answered as one of yes. His contention is that virtue ethics simply don't work. You know, what do you say? Aristotle is the greatest enemy of grace the world has ever seen. A little uncharitable, but that's why we love him. Philip Carey, writing in First Things last week, Philip Carey, the wonderful theologian, said, the great pastoral aim of Luther's doctrine of justification is to free us from the kind of performance anxiety that arises whenever our salvation depends in any way on us, our hearts, our will, or our doings. For anything we do is something about which we can ask, am I doing it well enough? Think of those high school kids. Am I doing it well enough? Am I a good enough parent? Am I a good enough wife? Am I a good enough citizen? Am I a good enough, activist? This righteousness, Luther realized, the signal from God has to be completely external. It has to come from outside us. We are the receivers, and that's it. Maybe we pick up the phone. Who knows? Maybe we shut up. But the phone only rings if God's calling. This is the pastoral heart of the Protestant Christian faith. And it is the reason why we gather here today. You know, sometimes you hear it characterized as a legal fiction, that it's all vicarious, it's all outside of you. But if you've actually experienced this kind of double imputation, the imputation that not only says you're forgiven for being a jerk, but I'm actually going to take you now because you're righteous in my eyes. I'm going to take you now to go visit your convicted felon of a father. Well, that is anything but fictitious in the life and experience of the believer. See, Luther's theology, and I'm quoting my younger brother here, of passivity is first and foremost a theology for Christian sinners. Christianity is a religion of the guilty, not the innocent, not the signalers. It is not too much of an exaggeration to say it is Luther's fundamental belief that Christians are more sinful than the church had realized, that under the surface things are usually much worse than they appear. That if there's anything fictitious about the Christian faith in 1517, it was the papist idea that there was some sort of ontological change in a believer that simply wasn't borne out by reality or the scriptures. So you have this beautiful thing where Protestantism comes to us as an attempt to think through what the church would be like if human beings were actually much more screwed up than we'd ever believed. This means that the church, those of us who are entrusted with this signal or just happen upon it as beggars, it thrives when you preach primarily to people in the congregation whose lives are falling apart, who are stuck in messes of their own making, the people who don't have it together, rather than to the energized Christian disciple, who's usually doing okay. Luther takes for granted that on some Sundays, sooner or later, every single one of us will end up being the one whose life is falling apart. This is why we repeat the same message, the same song. But by the way, it's less like a mockingbird than it is like a fugue. We heard Bach being played yesterday. A fugue is where you repeat the same notes, the same thematic notes over and over, but in all sorts of different ways that come together to form this extremely beautiful and captivating thing. This is why, one of the many reasons why Bach, has been called the fifth gospel. Because it's that same message of God's one way, unmerited love for the sinner. This tradition that was recovered in the Reformation, it takes seriously the short-term memory loss of humanity, the difficulty in discerning progress, ontological change, and the absolute necessity of hearing that one song over and over and over again. Which brings me to the passage that I was going to talk about. Do I have 5 more minutes? 5 more minutes? Matthew 22, the parable of the wedding banquet. Remember, you know that one? It's not the one in Luke that's kind of nice. This is the one where the king murders everyone. The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who gave a wedding banquet for his son. He sent slaves to call those who'd been invited to the wedding banquet, but they would not come. Again, he sent other slaves, saying, "Tell those who've been invited, look, I have prepared my dinner. My oxen, my fat calves have been slaughtered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding banquet." But they made light of it and went away, one to his farm, another to his business. So the king sent his troops and destroyed those murderers because they killed the other. I'm sort of reading it quickly. Then he said to his slaves, "The wedding is ready, but those who are invited are not worthy. Go therefore into the main street and invite everyone you find to the wedding banquet." Those slaves went out into the streets and gathered all of whom they found, both good and bad. So the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came in to see the guests, he noticed a man there who was not wearing a wedding robe. He said to him, "Friend, how did you get in here without a wedding robe?" And he was speechless. The king said to the attendants, "Bind him hand and foot and throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth, for many are called, but few are chosen." Amen, the end, good night. Just kidding. What we have here is the ultimate RSVP nightmare. Any pastors out there know what it's like? It's like, hey, I think 50 people are coming. Where are they? But anyone who's invited people ever to anything, this king sends out all these invitations, and not one of the people invited shows up on the day of the party. This is what is called to bail. They all bail. And in the Lucan version, one has a real estate deal he's got to work on. One's got some new oxen. So there's that. And the third one basically blames it on his wife. He said, "Sorry, I just got married. You know how it is. Just got a kid." It's an amusing list of excuses. All these people initially said they're coming. At the last minute, bail. They're not going to come. And perhaps you know someone who's unreliable like that, or with whom you're constantly making plans that you know are never actually going to happen. I work with college students in my other gig in Charlottesville, and to make a lunch date with a college student, you first make it, and then you confirm the day ahead of time, and then you confirm the morning of, and then you confirm when you're on your way. And so last week I had a kid who I forgot to confirm with the second time on the day of, and he was like, "Oh, I didn't know we were on." Sometimes I think cell phones and texts were invented for this reason. But what about the other side of the coin? Have you flaked on someone recently? I'm sure you have. There's so many appointments that are canceled in the last minute, and human nature is very fickle. And when it happens, it often pushes on our insecurities, especially if you're trying to, throw a church event, and you want more people, you want more butts in the seats. And they're not there. But this king is different. He goes, it doesn't seem to make him insecure. It makes him angry. It doesn't make him insecure. He continues right on ahead with his good time, which he plans on having regardless of who joins him in it. And we're told that his servants go in and say, "Bring anyone on the street, both the good and the bad." The signal going out from this king, what is it? Come on in. All are welcome. All these people who think they don't have time, all these people are too busy for me, just get in here. It's going to be great. It's all ready to go. What we find out is that God's party does not have bouncers, it has ushers. God's party does not have bouncers, it has ushers. And this grace, this voice of the King who is happy to welcome, to absolve, not because of who the people on the street are, but because of who he is. But because this is his disposition. It's an invite that does not expire, that's always being renewed here. It's a signal that endures. It forms the hope, the shape of hope for us and for our times, our divided times. But wait, and this is where it gets a little tricky, right? I'm almost done. You'd think these people didn't know they were going to a wedding. They didn't rent a tux. They don't have the wedding clothes. Like, how am I going to get? Well, I guess I could go, but you know. And presumably, they're the people on the street that don't have the means to even. They probably don't have the right clothes. They don't have it. So the implication here is that the king is providing them with the wedding clothes. The king is giving them these wedding garments. These, these what Daniel talked about in terms of the white as snow, the beautiful, the presentation that they could not muster on their own. It is the imputation of righteousness that not only welcomes in sinners, but clothes them in the righteousness from outside. It doesn't flip a switch to make the person transform into something. It puts the clothes on them. So that what God sees and says when he looks at us is not determined by our pedigree or our performance, our biology or our biography, the signals we're sending. It is determined by his love and grace, by the one who loved me and gave himself for me. Except for this one guy who says, I don't need those clothes. I think I can stand, think I can present myself just fine how I am. I'd rather stick to my own signals because they've served me okay, even though I didn't seem to have much going on this Friday night, but I'm here. I would prefer to stake my acceptability on my own identity, on my own righteousness. And guess what? It doesn't end well for that guy. The gnashing of teeth. Robert Capon did say so famously, if Jesus came to raise the dead, he did not come to reward the rewardable, improve the improvable, or correct the correctable. He came simply to be the resurrection of the life of those who will take their stand on a death he can use instead of on a life he cannot. Of course, as we know, you and I are all the people we're the people that say, I'm too busy right now. We're the people that come occasionally and allow the clothes to be on. Oftentimes, we're the people that get there. We're Christians. We're in the party. But they say, actually, I'd rather be the most pious here than be just like you. I'd rather stand on my own abilities here. Well, this was a parable told before those days on Golgotha, the day after which we hear Jesus descended into hell. By which we mean the hell not just of the guilty, but of the stubborn and the self-righteous and the counters, where people like you and me reside. And it is there where the story of the Reformation comes alive yet again. The question which it evoked, that was born out of human suffering and sin. The question, as my friend John L. Linebaugh says, is there any comfort? Is there any comfort for me who missed my opportunity? Or who got there but then has been sort of not sure I want this righteousness. The passivity is too uncomfortable. Is there any comfort for you? The answer that comes forth is yes. His name is Jesus Christ. Amen.